Hello, welcome to another episode of Montana Shares, your opportunity to find out about the nonprofits that make our state so great. I'm your host, Bill Crane, and today I have Liz Moore with Montana Nonprofit Association. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's kind of like a new tradition. We'll start the year with sort of the big picture as opposed to individual nonprofits who kind of have the big view.
That's good.
So let's talk about, just make sure everyone knows what Montana Nonprofit Association is and does to start with.
Sure. Well, we're the professional association for nonprofits. So some people kind of compare us to the chamber, the state chamber for nonprofits. So we have about 600 nonprofit members, and then maybe another 90 affiliate members who kind of come around nonprofits, consultants, accountants, those kinds of folks that support the work of nonprofits in different ways. And so we provide, well, we're really grounded in the belief that a strong sector, a strong nonprofit sector is as essential to Montana as a thriving business sector and a healthy government. So it's the three together, that we really need in our state. And so we look at what do we need in the state for nonprofit leaders to thrive, and those are the kinds of things that we provide.
Right. Okay, and so we were all up at the Capitol today.
Yes.
Tell everyone else what was going on
Sure.
today. We know.
If you don't know, that's a problem.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there are 5 or 6 areas we work in, and we provide education to nonprofit leaders. We provide information and research. We try to create stronger local networks, support philanthropy. So one of the areas we work in is public policy. And we look out for issues that might have a negative impact during the legislative session. I know it seems crazy that there would be one, because who would do that?
Who would pick on the nonprofits?
Who would pick on the nonprofits, right? But we also, this is the year, we have a Montana Charitable Endowment Tax Credit. It's a great tax credit, and it supports philanthropy in the state in all kinds of communities. And every 6 years, it expires, and this is the year. So we are requesting an extension of that credit, and that bill was heard today. So that was a big deal.
So this tax credit, it's responsible for millions of dollars staying in the state of Montana. Is that even close to a correct statement?
That's uncannily correct.
Well,
yes.
We also chatted about it a few weeks back, so I hope I remember a little bit.
Yes. So how the credit works is it's 40% credit. So if you were to give a gift of $1,000 to a nonprofit, it has to be a certain kind. It goes into a planned endowment. It has to be a planned gift into an endowment. And so not direct gifts, but you would get 40% credit, $400. And so the cost to the state of that credit generally is about $2.5 million a year. So that means that $2.5 million is 40% of what, $5 million, something, or $2.5 million. So it must be about $6 million a year in gifts. And we know that actually there are more gifts generated because there's a cap on the credit. So somebody might give $25,000 and get their $10,000 cap, or somebody might give $50,000 and still just get the $10,000 cap. They can only get $10,000, but not only, but you get my point.
Right.
Yeah.
But one way or another, lots of money stays in Montana in endowments that gets spent out each year in helping the nonprofit communities.
Right. It's a really unique credit. It's great for donors, and part of that is about leaving money in Montana. Thinking about back in the millionaire days, a lot of money left the state, and if that money were available now for society in Montana, our communities and our culture and civil society, that'd be a really good thing. So that's part of what this attempts to do. And the credit has to go into, it has to be a gift that goes into a qualified endowment, which means it is not sloppy. It's, it's really kind of a highly defined gift bucket. And it requires planning and thought, and it's just a precious little tool we have that's kind of unique to Montana. I think there might be 4 other states that have charitable giving incentives of this kind. Just a handful, maybe a few more than that.
So something great. How long has it been going on for?
Since let's see, it was first passed in 1997, and it came out of the Governor's Task Force on Philanthropy when Governor Roscoe was in. It was very nicely supported in a bipartisan fashion. This year, last session, the sponsor was Taylor Brown out of Billings. This year, it is Senator Mark Blaisdell from the Kalispell area, and so we appreciate his involvement in it and getting it moved through. So it's heard in the Senate today. We'll see, how long it takes to get through committee, and then hopefully there'll be no hitches and it'll be on its way to the House.
It's been going for 20 years. We're just looking for another 6 years.
We're looking for another 6. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great.
Yeah.
Thanks for the work that you do for us up there.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, it's one thing to have 600 members, but indirectly you represent several, at least a few thousand nonprofits, if not several thousand nonprofits in the state.
Several thousand. Yeah. We just today we launched our economic report, which is in my bag over there, so I won't jump up and get it. But it's on our website, and it's a report which goes through kind of how many nonprofit jobs there are in the state. So we employ about 51,000 people in the state, and even when you take the hospitals and healthcare centers out, it's still, I think, 29,500 nonprofit employees in the state. We paid out $2.2 billion in wages last year in 2017. So, it's we're an economic driver, and a big part of what makes Montana work. And when you sit next to someone on the plane and you talk to them about Montana, there is not a casual, oh yeah, I really like Montana, I hope I get to go there. People are like, I love Montana. And we know that nonprofits are a big part of that. When we look at the groups that keep the streams clean and make sure we have bike trails, and the Myrtle Loy and the work that they do, and Chaudere and Intermountain, and nonprofits really are the fabric of the community in many of our Montana communities.
Right. Yeah, I'm always impressed by how many there are in the state and how much they do. I mean, really, when you think about roughly, it's twice as many employees in nonprofits as there are in state government. If I recall, there's about 14,000 people in state government.
That could be.
And so it is a driving force, without a doubt.
Yeah, and we have, in Montana, we have more nonprofits per capita than I think any other state. But out of 7,200 nonprofits, only 2,200 have employees. So you've got about 5,000 nonprofits that operate all volunteer. And so those are volunteer boards in communities. They're often like 4-H, Little League, things like that. And in Montana, I think because we're so far apart from each other, there really is this sense of the community creating what it needs. The nonprofit is, any nonprofit is a response to, the will of the public, kind of how we want our lives to be and how we want it to be for our kids. Right. And so nonprofits are varied and very much reflective of individual communities.
So what should we be looking at or concerned about on the federal level right now? Well, on my little end-of-year notes, as I was looking ahead at what to expect, I did have the word gridlock on there, and I think that's an issue. Regardless of what happens with federal government and the shutdown, I think generally gridlock is an issue, and so I think that it's problematic, and because one of the things that happens is kind of like with tax reform. There's nothing, and then something is slammed through without a lot of rules, and then, or without a lot of specifics, and then it's left to the agencies to set rules, which causes a lot of problems, and we have a couple examples of that. The biggest one is that nonprofits are now in a convoluted, weird thing. We're now subject to unrelated business income tax on expenses related to transportation benefits for employees. So for example, we work in downtown Helena. There's no free downtown Helena parking, right? So we pay for parking permits to be in the garage, and that is now taxed as income, although it is an expense. And there's a reason, but it doesn't even make sense. So that's a problem, and nobody likes it. But it happened in that rush of let's make sense of tax reform, and now it has to be unraveled, and it requires just a huge amount of work to be unraveled at the federal level. So
that rule on UBIT is a big thing. We're still paying attention to the Johnson Amendment and the potential repeal of that amendment. That's the only thing that really stands between nonprofits and the ability to use nonprofit funds to support political candidates. And so how, from our perspective, what that would do to the reputation of nonprofits if you could receive money from donors as a tax deduction for them, and then this expectation maybe that you would support a certain political candidate. It would just be very undermining to the whole nonprofit form and our integrity and what we stand for. So the Johnson Amendment's a little tiny sentence that keeps that from happening, and it's been under fire for the last 2 years, but so far the nonprofit community and others have held steady, and so it has not been repealed. So that's another thing we're paying attention to. There are some other rules related to tax credits. In the past, if you gave a donation of $1,000, you get $400 tax credit, and then at the federal level, you'd get a deduction for the full $1,000 gift. Now, due to some things that came out of tax reform and some pressures that were put on the system as a result of tax reform, they're changing those rules so that whatever the value of the tax credit was, you have to pull that off before you get your deduction. So if you got a $400 tax credit, now you would only be able to deduct $600 at the federal level. So that's a big change if you're in that business. And that along with the, I feel like I'm talking techno talk now, but along with the doubling of the standard deduction for non-itemizers, it's really potentially changed philanthropy for nonprofits.
Certain segment at least. I know with shares, our smaller donors, they give because they care.
Right.
It's not a tax choice for them. So we haven't seen a lot of change at that smaller donor level, but I'm sure there's plenty of, because last time we talked, you said a lot of the large donors do itemize, and now that's changing drastically how they, what benefits they get for doing that. Well,
it's anticipated that only 5% of folks will itemize, and so that is a big change.
That's big,
yeah, and hopefully it'll hold steady. The end of the year is really mixed. We did a little poll and to see where how the end of the year was for folks in terms of philanthropy, and it was mixed. Some people said absolutely we believe it had an impact. Others didn't feel it did. Some had prepared and gone a different route for their year-end giving. And really worked to get more of those major donors who would be itemizing either way. So, it's just a mix. Yeah. So the nonprofit community is healthy, and I think we've settled into, I think we talked about this last time, there was this anxiety about what's going to happen with a different administration, and then there was like, life is kind of hard, we're going to have cuts and things like that. I think now we're just dealing with whatever comes our way, and I think we expect to have uphill battles, and it's the way it is, and the nonprofit function is doing what it should do in Montana and nationally.
Great. I think that's a great way to close.
Okay.
So thanks for coming on the show today, as always.
Thank you.
I really like this idea of starting the year with the big picture, so thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
And as always, I thank you guys for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.